Last week, Lamar Jackson, Joe Mixon, Javonte Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown went off in fantasy football and helped you win your week. Now, in this video, I'm bringing you 10 players who will do the same in week 8. Guys that you have got to start, the superstars of week 8. Starting off with Kareem the DREAM Abdul Hunt. Okay, Kareem Hunt. Sorry, went a little too extra there. He plays the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders right now are the 5th best matchup for your running back when you adjust for schedule. Have a look. Chuba Hubbard, 23 points, over 13 yards per carry. Javonte Williams, 16 points, one of his better games. Najee Harris had his best game this year, over 7 yards per carry versus the Raiders. Kyren Williams had almost 20 points, 2 touchdowns. The Raiders right now are top 10 in rushing yards allowed per game, yards per carry allowed, and total points allowed per game to opposing offenses. The Chiefs are one of the biggest favorites in week 8, and we could easily see this team running the clock out in the second half. I mean, look, the Raiders have the 3rd lowest implied team point total of the week at just 16 points. So there's a very realistic scenario after the half. Kareem Hunt is just being fed carries to end this game. And by the way, Kareem has been a superstar in fantasy since taking over this job. In the last 2 games, he's averaging over 20 PPR points. And I'm predicting at least 20 touches and 16 plus PPR points in this matchup. All right, the second player, I know he let you down last week. He let me down. It wasn't his fault. It's time to get right back on track, baby. Tyreek Hill versus the Cardinals. There is not a single lineup where he shouldn't start. I don't care if you're in a 2-team league. All right, he's got to be in your lineup. He plays the Cardinals, which honestly, that's not the best matchup. They're kind of middle of the pack. But here's the deal. Terry McLaurin had 18 points on them. Brandon Ayuk had his best day before the injury with 22 points, 147 yards. Romeo Doubs had 2 touchdowns versus these guys, so you can beat them through the air. And like I said, less about the matchup, more about the fact that we finally get Tua Tagovailoa back into this lineup. Salvation is here, Tyreek Hill owners. It's time to fire him back up. Look, the reality is Tyreek has been so good with Tua and so bad without him. I'm going to show you some numbers here. Since 2023, Tyreek has played 18 games with Tua. And those 18 games, he's averaging almost 23 points per game. He's averaging almost 110 receiving yards per game. But without Tua in the past 2 years, he's averaging just 7.6 fantasy points and 35 receiving yards. Disgusting, okay? But thank God salvation is here with Tua. The entire Dolphins offense is going to bounce back in a huge way. And listen to Tyreek. Even he's telling you to start him.
We're back, baby. Strike up the fucking band. We're back, baby. Start me this week, baby. Let's go.
I'm predicting at least 7 receptions for 90 yards, 18 plus PPR points. All right, this takes me to my spicy, hot, bold take of the week. Javonte Williams puts up over 100 rushing yards for the first time since over 1,000 days ago while the Broncos pummel the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers right now are the best matchup for your running back, point blank period. All right, remember, Chase Brown had his best pro day, 2 touchdowns over 5 yards per carry, 23 fantasy points. DeAndre Swift had 20 points. Bijan had 2 touchdowns, 25 points. Even Tyler Algier in the same game almost had 20 points. The Panthers defense right now is top 4 in rushing yards allowed per game, most yards allowed per game, and points allowed per game. They give up almost 5 touchdowns worth of points. Javonte's season has been a complete roller coaster, right? But signs are pointing upwards. In the first 3 games, you can see it was so rough. I mean, let's actually break this down further, right? Weeks 1 to 3 versus weeks 4 to 7. In weeks 1 to 3, we were averaging 2.2 yards per clip. Now we're over 5. In weeks 1 to 3, we were averaging 17 yards per game. Now we're over 62. In weeks 1 to 3, we were averaging 7 points per game. Now we're up over 14. The matchup is just far too juicy to leave him on my bench. Like I said, 15 carries at least and 100 yards for the first time in 1,000 days. All right, moving on. Davante Adams, baby. Davante Adams, it is time for him to shine as a New York Jet. And, you know, like Tyreek, this isn't the best matchup. This is a middle of the pack matchup, but it's not about the matchup. It's more about him and Aaron Rodgers finally getting on the same page, that Unagi mind meld, if you will. Since the year 2000, Davante Adams is averaging over 23 points per game with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. Without Aaron Rodgers in 38 games, he's averaging about 17. Still great, but missing that little greatness that Rodgers can give him. And they weren't on the same page in Davante's Jets debut, but there were encouraging signs like 96% of the snaps week 1, 9 targets, which was tied with Garrett Wilson, and he was targeted multiple times in the end zone. I think this is the week that they finally get on the same page. 8+ targets, 80 yards, a touchdown, and 20 PPR points is my prediction. Big day. All right, the 5th player we're starting with ultimate confidence this week is Josh Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. He faces the Jacksonville Jaguars, okay, which is the 4th best matchup for your running back. Devon Achane had his best week versus them. Daria Gumbawale had 15 points. Trey Sermon had 18 points in a spot start. DeAndre Swift averaged over 5 yards per clip and 22 fantasy points. This team is top 5 in total yards allowed per game and total points given up to opposing offenses. Every single team in the NFL who faces the Jags, it's free game on the ground. And the Packers, by the way, are tied for the 2nd highest implied team point total on the week with 27 points. I could see Josh Jacobs getting fed in the second half, and he's being fed as a Packer a lot of cheese, a lot of fantasy cheese for Josh Jacobs this week, and a lot of carries. Right now, he is top 3 in carries in the NFL, only behind Derrick Henry and Jordan Mason. Should smash in week 8. I'm predicting at least 20 touches, 90+ yards, and 16 fantasy points. All right, at number 6, my favorite quarterback play this week is Joe Burrow versus the Eagles. Last week we did Drake May, going a little safer this week, but I think Joey B is going to be great despite the bad matchup. Yeah, you're going to see that in your fantasy apps, right? It'll say, well, Philadelphia is not a good matchup. They're technically the 6th worst matchup, right? Okay, fair enough. But it's been up and down for Philly if we look at their season. Let's play good cop and bad cop, and we'll start with the bad cop. All right, bad cop. Well, Derek Carr had 8.9 points. Deshaun Watson had 8 points, and Daniel Jones had 6. Good cop. Jordan Love had 17, 2 tuds. Kirk Cousins had 17, 2 tuds. And Baker Mayfield had 28, 3 tuds. What do you notice about the bad and the good outcomes versus the Eagles defense? Well, what I notice is in the bad outcomes, you had average quarterbacks that don't have multiple elite weapons. In the good outcomes, you have great quarterbacks that have multiple elite weapons, just like Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So while the Eagles have been better as a defense, when they face good air attacks, you can beat them. And Joe Burrow's on a tear in 2024. He's not getting enough respect. If the Bengals had a positive record, he would be in the MVP conversation. And I'm saying that as someone who roots for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Joe Burrow, 14 touchdowns, over 70% of his passes completed, and just 2 interceptions. Right now, him and Lamar are the clear frontrunners, in my humble opinion. I'm predicting at least 250 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and a top 6 finish for Joe Burrow in week number 8. Okay, Amari Cooper, got to be in your lineup at the Seahawks. Technically not a good matchup, but again, less about the matchup. We're doing that a lot this week, and more about the fact that Amari found his perfect home. This might be the match made in heaven. This might be the best fit for Amari in his career. I'm genuinely saying that. It might be his best fit. In his first game as a Bill, he played just 34% of the snaps. He ran just 12 routes, but was targeted 5 times. That is so impressive. And you can see on just 34% of the snaps, he had his 2nd best day in fantasy this year with 66 yards and a touchdown. If you look last week at the Bills wide receiver target percentage per route run, you'll see you got Keon and Shakir around 25%, Mac at 4%, and Amari Cooper at a whopping 42% of, 42% of the time Amari Cooper ran a route, the boy was targeted. I mean, what happens when he's playing 90% of the snaps like we expect him to? The guy's going to take off. I'm expecting 90+% of the snaps, 7 targets, and 16+ PPR points. All right, let's talk about J.K. Dobbins. Did not hit last week. All right, my bad. I'll take accountability for that, but we're rolling it back, baby. JK versus the New Orleans Saints. This is the 6th best matchup for your running back in fantasy right now when you adjust for schedule. And it is so strange to be saying these words out loud, but the Saints rushing defense has unraveled completely. This is one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL over the past 5 years, and they've completely fallen apart. In the last 3 weeks alone, Kareem Hunt had 18 points, 117 total yards. Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker both went absolutely crazy. Javonte Williams had his best day as a pro in like 1,000 days. And right now in the NFL, they are top 6 in yards allowed per rush, rushing yards allowed per game, total yards allowed per game, and total points given up per game. It's crazy how the Saints defense has completely collapsed. And similar to the Kareem Hunt take, in this matchup, the Saints had the second lowest implied team point total of the week at just 16 points, which means Dobbins could be dominating in the second half, getting so many carries, sweet garbage time touchdowns and yardage and breakaway runs, similar to what we've seen from a lot of games with the Saints. All right, at number 9, my favorite tight end play this week, Evan Ingram versus the Packers. The Packers are the 5th best matchup for your tight end when you adjust for schedule. Colby Parkinson had a nice day versus these guys. Trey McBride had his highest receiving yardage output this year versus the Green Bay Packers. And this is the highest over-under of the week. And the Packers are favored by 4.5 points, which indicates to us that the game script could be the Jags down in this game, needing to throw, which means there could be some sweet garbage time usage for Evan Ingram. I'm very excited about that. I'm predicting him to get at least 8 targets, 60 yards, and 13 plus PPR points. Okay, and my last player, I want to clarify here. This player is specifically for people out there who need a flex and they're in a desperate situation. All right, this player definitely doesn't fit the title of this video. I'm not expecting him to be a weak winner, but I think he'll be a fine play. That is Jalen McMillan. Yes, Jalen McMillan versus the Atlanta Falcons. The 6th best matchup when you adjust for schedule for your wide receiver. The Falcons, you can beat them this year. Devonta Smith had 20 points. Rashee Rice did great. Mike Evans had a 23-point game. Deontay Johnson had almost 20 points, and DK Metcalf did the same. Moment of silence for Christopher Godwin. I miss you, Chris. I really do. But Chris was dominating in the slot for this team. And we know, if you know anything about Jalen McMillan out of Washington, is that he dominated the slot work for the Washington Huskies. Now, he could play inside. He can play outside. I'm not sure exactly where they'll line him up, but in college, he played 90% of his snaps in the slot in 2023 and 92% of his snaps in 2022 in the slot. Ultimately, I believe, and this is just my personal bias, that he can be one of the better slot wide receivers in the NFL when he gets there as a talent. I think he's such a good prospect. And every time he was healthy at Washington, he's putting up huge numbers right alongside Rome Odunze. And the good news is, if they play him in the slot, the Atlanta Falcons give up the 6th most points to slot wide receivers. Add on to the fact that Mike Evans is out for the game. So even if they don't put Jalen in the slot, he'll be getting targets out wide. And I think he's going to be the number 1 target at the wide receiver spot for Baker Mayfield this year. Last week alone on Monday Night Football, he had 8 targets in a game where Mike Evans left early, but Chris Godwin was there the entire way, right? 8 targets. That was highest outside of Chris Godwin and Kate Otten. Godwin's gone. Evans is gone. 5 catches, 60 yards, and 11 plus points is what I'm predicting here. So a solid flex play. If it doesn't work out, all right, come clown me, but I like to have a little fun. I like to party. I like to party sometimes in fantasy football. All right. I appreciate you for watching the video. Do me a favor, hit that like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. Last thing I'll say, guys, huge value to you here. If you don't have a free account with Flock Fantasy yet, go get you a free account, free 95. All you got to do is sign up with the promo code LAND. And when you do, you can get a free account and access the My Teams feature for free. You can access expert consensus rankings for free and the trade calculator for free. Again, just by using the code LAND at sign up. And lastly, if you're having a tough decision this week with start sits, check out the pinned comment. There's a link directly to our website where you can ask me a question. I appreciate you watching. Let's go get a win here in week 8. You got this, all right? Don't give up. You got this. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.